It was like there was two parts of me. There was the part who was functioning, who was open, who was welcoming and gracious, and I could be that because that's how God made me to be. But at the same time, there was the things that were holding me back, my addictions, my insecurities, my fears, and just all my dysfunction. And I was very good at compartmentalizing those and keeping them separate as much as I could, until the moments I couldn't and they would intersect. I was addicted to first opioids and then methamphetamines. At first, I thought they enhanced me or I needed them in some way. I felt like they made me more authentically me or a better version of me, I thought. And like the first time I tried meth was in high school, and I would use it to study and I'd get great grades. Or the first time I tried heroin, I thought it helped me with my overcome like any depression, like secret depressions I might have had. And so I thought they were like a tool I could utilize at first, until they weren't. And then what they ended up being were things I needed in order to function. It wasn't my choice to use them anymore. I grew a dependence on them. So things became really shallow between me and my friends. Started spending less and less time with them because, you know, the closer people come, also then the closer they get to see how you're living. And, you know, so I wouldn't allow people to come into my home, or it would be very, what I would allow them to see would be very curated. One of the treatments I chose was methadone. They kept increasing my dose till I was on one of the highest doses in the clinic. And I would think that with each increase of methadone that it would be what would help me set me free from the addiction, but it wasn't. And so it was becoming very disheartening because my dose of methadone was increasing, but I was still using the drugs. When I was younger, I accepted Jesus Christ into my life on numerous occasions. Every time there was an altar call, I loved accepting Jesus Christ into my heart, and it was genuine, and I'd accept him with joy. And then as I became a teenager and grew into adolescence, you know, I became very worldly. I was pushing God away from my life. Would do everything I can to like denounce him. Surrounded myself with people who were also very far from God. But I do believe that because I accepted Jesus Christ into my life, that the Holy Spirit stuck with me or still pursued after me, and I would get glimpses of the Holy Spirit throughout. That I would try and push away the feeling or the ignorance. But then there was times where I could just feel God's grace on my life, keeping me from going too far. You know, the people I was surrounded with, and myself included, were in like the depths of depravity. But somehow I just had God's grace in my life, that a protection over my relationships, over the people who would come into my life, a protection from the law. Even though I had my fair share of incidences with the law, I don't have anything on my record. He's just given me a grace whenever I had my run-ins with the police. My mom actually recommended New Heart Place to me back when I was 21, and I just scoffed at the idea. I was like, Jesus Christ, to get me off of drugs, that makes no sense whatsoever. Like, how is a discipleship program supposed to get a person off of drugs? Don't they know it's a medical issue and that there's a physical component to it? And so I scoffed at it and just threw that pamphlet to the corner and forgot about it. But then God working in my life, he put me into a working environment after college that just surrounded me with people, Christians, co-workers who were so happy to profess Christ in their daily life, weren't ashamed of the gospel and not pushy about the gospel, but being a Christian was just who they were, and it was just so reflected in their being. I didn't have to bring my clients to church anymore. I stopped working on Sundays, but my clients would cry out like, Gabe, when are we gonna go to church again? When are we gonna go to church again? I was bringing him to Westgate Chapel because this is the church that I grew up in. And as I started bringing him to church and listening to Pastor Alex's message, it was like, wow, is this guy reading my mail? Like, he is talking to what's going on in my life right now. And I found it very helpful to myself just coming to church. And so I started coming to church, not just because I wanted to do something for my client, but because it was interesting to me. I was getting help for it in my work life, in my home life. There was just several altar calls where my heart was just burning inside of me, where I knew I wanted to come up, but the fear was gripping me and I was just holding onto my seat like this just so I wouldn't get up there. And it was just that dynamic or that tension of being drawn by the Spirit to go up to the altar, and the fear that was holding me back was kind of almost that tension was almost a painful experience, and I fought it off on 3 occasions where finally I just knew in the core of my being that Jesus Christ was calling me up to the altar. And so one Sunday, I just prayed a quick prayer, and it was just, Jesus, I just want to die to myself so I can receive what you would have for me this Sunday. And lo and behold, there was an altar call that Sunday. And so there's the altar call, and I want to hold on to my seat, but before I know it, I'm up at the altar and I'm like, oh geez, how did I get up here? And I'm ready to go back to my seat, but before I know it, Pastor Eric's up there ready to pray for me. And that was actually the first time I actually admitted to somebody outside of my drug using circle that I had a problem with drugs. He was like, oh geez, let's get you help for that. And I was like, no, don't. And I was ready to go back to my seat. And he was like, no, there's somebody I can get you or go to for this. And he's like, and so he brings up you, Pastor Ron, and you invite me to Monday Night New Heart. One of the strongholds I had built up in my case against Jesus was, well, that just doesn't make any sense. Jesus, who's the Son of God? Like I just threw it out wholesale. He's revealed himself to me just through this spiritual vision I had of Jesus on the road to the cross, and him carrying this heavy burden of the cross and him hardly able to make it another step. And he's just so tormented and bruised. But then he looks back over his shoulder and sees me through time, just an image of me. And he knows what he's doing is worth it because it's gonna help me in the future. And that just that image. I'd wanna say that in Jesus' relationship with God, it brings a wholeness to your life. Where all parts of you can come into unity. The parts of you that are hindering you from being who God meant for you to be will start falling away. That you can really trust Jesus with your life. It's like, can Jesus really do this for me? Well, yes, he can. He did it for me. That you can really put your hope and your trust in him. That you don't have to live that way any longer. I lived with addiction. Addiction was my closet that I've lived in for so many years. It took me 14 years to get sober. And you don't have to live the way you are any longer. And My prayer for you is that you can come into relationship with Jesus Christ and that you can trust him too. Don't lose hope for your child. Don't stop praying for them. Your child is in God's hands. God has called you to a place of intercession for your child, and also he's called you into a community of believers you can share your burdens with, where you don't have to be in shame over your child's addiction. Seek out community. There's people who would love to pray for you. I love praying for people, prodigals and children who are in addiction, and partnering with parents who are in prayer. And there's other parents in this church who are going through the same thing. And there's people who've come out of addiction who have a heart for your child who would want to partner with you in prayer. And ultimately, that you just have to trust Jesus and keep praying that your child's heart would be open to receiving the truth about Jesus and welcoming him into their life for themselves. You can only carry the burden for your child for so long, and we weren't meant to carry that burden. God will do it for you. You can't do it for your son or daughter yourself. Eventually, there's a time where you just have to give it up to God and just trust and believe